successful women about tricks of the trade, what to do, what to avoid, all to inspire you in your own business. See you there.
Hi, welcome. I am Pastor Alva Kershaw, and I'm co-hosting or guest hosting in the Frequency of Hope. And the show runs from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And we thank you for joining us tonight. And my co-host, she's a guest also, is Pastor Latrell Baker. And we will be talking about reflections on the life of Martin Luther King Jr. And what it means to us, and just some of the ideas that we see on Facebook. So current events, but also the past, and reflections on how this has affected our lives as two African-American women. So we're excited to be here tonight. We welcome your calls. I'm covering or guest hosting for Stephanie Clark. She is the actual host of In the Frequency of Hope. And so I thank her for allowing us to be on tonight. And welcome, Pastor Latrell. How are you today?
I'm good, Pastor Alva. How are you?
I'm well. I'm excited about this show and some of the things. So let's, just hit the ground running.
Okay.
And let's talk about some of the things that, have impacted your life for MLK Day, and what it actually means even for him to have a holiday, a federal holiday. So what does that mean to you? What does that mean to us?
Well, as African Americans, I think that is a milestone for us, considering where we are in these times. And so I think we should not take it for granted that this wonderful pioneer, this civil rights activist who stood on the battlegrounds during his time, has a day that is set aside just for him, to celebrate him, his life, and his legacy, and the things that he accomplished as far as civil rights for African Americans. So it's not a day that we should just do nothing.
Right.
I think it's a time for us to step up and, be the change that we want to see in the world, that he started, to continue his legacy. It's not just a day off from work.
Yeah, not just a day off from work. One of the things that I find very interesting is how difficult it is being a parent of young people.
Mm-hmm.
My children are still children, very much minors. And I just find it very challenging sometimes to communicate to them what his life really meant and what his works meant, and why it is so important to ensure that we are taking care of civic responsibilities, to
Right.
ensure that we don't use the day just to sleep
Mm-hmm.
in, or to say that, it's a day off from school.
Right.
That we actually do something within the community. Because I think my children, and I not necessarily have I done a great job of actually communicating to them, but a part of me, struggles with communicating his legacy without the trauma of why it was necessary in the first place.
I think because the generation that they're in, it makes it difficult, because although we may teach it at home, but there's no reinforcement in the schools as far as his life and his legacy and what it meant. And the fact that they're able to even go to school
Is a part of what he
Yes.
was and who he was.
And so, because it's not taught and it's not reinforced, so their understanding is like, oh, well, it's just a day out of school. But I think we need to have more for them so they can understand the importance of it, understand that they are a part of that legacy and that they need to keep it going.
Yes, and I think I wonder how, because I have a lot of questions, when I think about what his life meant to me, and as just celebrating it, coming and growing into adulthood, celebrating the holiday and the struggle of actually getting the holiday to be not only just a national holiday, but recognized. Because it's one thing to say, oh, that's a holiday, and it's dismissed.
Right.
it's just kind of dismissed and clumped in to other things.
Right.
And then to have it mean something, to have it be recognized by the local government, be recognized by local groups, and to have actual events and large gatherings that commemorate the day, that celebrate the day.
And what's amazing to me is that it wasn't not too long ago that it just became a national holiday.
Right.
So it's not something it's been there for years and years. This is something fairly new for it to become a national holiday. So I think we need to do more in our communities, in our schools, even in our churches. So the younger generation can understand the importance of his life.
When I do look back at the footage and you see some of the footage of the things that he did, what is the thing that's most impactful to you?
What's impactful for me is how he could bring people together. And it was about love and nonviolence. Because now when we see people gathering for causes and things that they believe in, it breaks my heart because of the things that you see. It may start out in a nonviolent way, but then it becomes violent. And so, it breaks my heart that we have crossed, we have no love lines now. So it's disheartening to see.
Ways.
Yes, it's disheartening to see how the legacy, what he stood for, is distorted in some ways.
And I think that's what I mean when I say I want to communicate to my daughters that his legacy and life were important. And so when I think about the things that have impacted me, there are a couple of things. One of the things I just remember watching footage of his speeches, and even as a youth, when I not necessarily understand the depth of the argument,
Right.
not necessarily understanding even the depth of the pain of our people fully, I always knew that what he was saying was important. Like I could always feel like a part of my faith, my spirituality, his words would move me, his emotions would move me. But even the responses of the crowds and the people who supported him would move me. But what also would move me, and I didn't recognize it as strength as a child, but watching footage of riots or protests that were initially peaceful, and then when law enforcement would come and actually interrupt, and the people would be attacked violently with the dogs and the hoses and stuff, and then to see him maintain a nonviolent stance. And I now think about his strength and his fortitude to do so, because I even would look at that and say, there's no way I could do that. There's no way I could actually, and he had to be a very disciplined person to endure, especially now as an adult, understanding better the pain, understanding better the depth of the argument, understanding the better the character of the person and the character of the speech. I have a dream, because the speech itself has become larger than he himself.
Yes,
the words came out of him and he wrote it, but it's much larger than any one man or any one person, right? And so just hearing that, and I think to myself today, the impact that he has on my life is, just a strong spirit. And I just hope as a pastor, because we're both pastors, I just hope as a pastor that I'll be able to lead the people.
Yes, in the same way, because, you mentioned the speech, I Have a Dream, and what came to mind is, how many of our youth today can say, I have a dream?
Right. And what does it even mean to have
a dream? Yes.
Right. Especially the one that he embodied.
Yes.
So let's share some of the quotes. One of my favorite quotes about him, and one of the more famous ones, is free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free. at last. I just wonder what our kids would say. And any callers out there, we'll be taking calls in about 30 minutes. The number is 804-464-1089 if you want to call in and join the conversation or share a favorite quote or how this has impacted your life, his life has impacted your life, and even the conversation that we're having today. So let's bring this up to speed a little bit, get the conversation going. Recently, my children and I watched the movie, or at least my 16-year-old, and I watched the movie The Hate You Give.
Wow.
Right.
And I took my 13-year-old
To see
to
that.
see it. And she just said not too long ago, she said, I wanted to see that movie again.
Again.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it had an impact on her because although it was basically art imitating life, she saw the struggles as an African American, what we deal with. Because some of the shows she look at, everybody loves each other and everybody's happy and get along, and at the end of the show everybody's worked out their problems. But when she saw that movie, it was almost as if a light bulb went off and said, okay, this is real life for us.
Right.
This is the life that we're now living. And she had the question, why do white people hate us?
Right.
And so, I had explained to her, it's not everyone.
Right.
I said, but, some of it is a learned behavior. I said, because they don't have an understanding of who we are as African Americans.
And even if they do, sometimes it's based in fear.
Mm-hmm.
Like we are taught to, be afraid of people that don't look like us.
Mm-hmm.
And even Black people, African Americans,
Yes.
are taught to be afraid of white people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can go both ways, but also other cultures like Indian culture, Muslim culture, Hispanic culture. We're taught to not like it if you don't look like me.
Right.
Instead of asking questions, a lot of my friends, even African Americans, will be like, you're different from even us because you entertain questions that we would never entertain.
Right.
And I said, I would rather people ask questions and get answers than to make assumptions and just perpetuate the hate.
Right.
I would rather you say, well, I'm gonna say you're safe. You're my safe Black person. That you can ask all the questions, and if I'm offended, I'm gonna tell you, hold on, you're good, because I'm a safe person. Please don't ask anybody else because they're not gonna be safe. They're gonna be very angry because it is offensive.
Right.
And it even kind of made me twinge a little bit, but I get it.
Right.
I'm offering myself as your safe person. And so it's just exciting that we can have conversations such as this one. And I'm just applauding, in the frequency of hope. And I'm glad to be the guest host here tonight for Stephanie Clark. So it's just wonderful that we have the opportunity to talk about the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King on the radio. Yeah. And our kids don't even understand that this is an opportunity that we would not have had in a previous time, and during the time that he was growing up. And so, or he was an activist. And so it's just amazing. My daughter's response to The Hate You Give was, we hesitated for a really long time to watch the movie because I am so sensitive to the pain, so sensitive to the injury, but I understand that they need an explanation. They need a dialogue. They need a backstory to understand what is going on. Right. And so The Hate You Give, first of all, let me be clear. I did not realize that was the line from a song by Tupac. I don't know what I thought that was, but it was so apropos for the movie. And basically, we talk about the hate you give to little babies is the hate that you will see walking around in the world. And I think people who haven't watched it, or just like me. So this is a plug, but I encourage anybody to go and see it, but have a dialogue.
Right.
Make sure you don't see it by yourself.
Exactly.
You want to be able to talk to people and process it through, and then release the rage or the anger that comes up. But it was very interesting, because what I found interesting in the movie was that the white character, the male, whom she was dating, he really loved her.
Yes.
Like, he really had a genuine interest in her as a person. He wasn't just dating her because it was trendy.
Right.
He wasn't dating her because it was something rebellious to do because of the school he attended. But also equally as surprising was the relationships that she had with the white girls. That once she had an incident in her real life, because it almost made going to school with them and being friends with them was much of a pretense.
Right.
Right. That being with them in real life was almost impossible. It was an impossibility. And they had to have a conversation that none of them were prepared to have.
Exactly.
And none of them actually had the skill set to have, and there were no adults to help them process it. And so it was coming out as misunderstanding. You just don't understand me.
Right.
You just judged me. Or you thought that I was like you and assumed that my life is like your life. And when you find out that it isn't, instead of asking questions,
assumptions were made.
Judgments were made. But even some discrimination resulted as you're not like me. Prejudice kind of rose to the surface, which brought me back to the way that I went to high school and the transitions I made from going to public school to private school. And still, when we go back to reunions, going from a predominantly African-American inner city school to a dominant, not predominant, but dominantly white school, being one of two African-Americans in my class, and feeling like nobody there really understood my life, and even having that confirmed at class reunions, that we didn't have the same kind of life, and it's confirmed. We've been out of school, we've graduated, it's been 20 plus years, and when we go back, there's often a conversation about some awareness that they've come to, that they now want to come to their safe Black person and say, even though reunions only happen every 5 years, right? They come back to their safe Black person and say, I had no idea. And every 5 years that I live, I come back with a new revelation of how ignorant I was, of how bigoted I was, of how prejudiced I was. And sometimes it's even undergirded with an apology. And that's the healing part. And I'm willing to do that, because we don't all get the same awareness or information or wake up, if you will, at the same time.
Right.
And so if a person gets that in their life, I want to be the person that you can come and say, you know what, I had no idea. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. I'm learning, and I'm still learning. I think we need that.
We do. I think we do. And I ran across a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And it's about walls.
Okay.
And because we have the issue of the government being shut down because our president wants to build this wall.
Okay.
And so the quote says, "For here on either side of the wall are God's children, and no man-made barrier can obliterate that fact." So if the mindset would be that on either side of the wall that wants to be built, that there's God's children are there, I think we may have a different approach to a wall being built.
Yeah, that's a very interesting. But these are people.
These are people. These are not
people.
animals.
These are people.
These are people.
Yeah.
They're children. Their mothers, their fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers. They're people.
And we're still gonna suffer the hate you give.
Yes.
That movie is so. The title alone is apropos and can tell a story from many points of view. And we will have to deal with the hate you give.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's very important. Another quote that I really would like to I'd like to share is The time is always right to do what is right. I think that's a beautiful quote. The time is always right to do what is right. And that's one of his more famous quotes. The time is always right to do what is right. And I think we need to ask ourselves and each other across the aisle, what is right? What is right for us all? Not just what feels good.
Right. Or what's right for one group, but not for another, but what's right for all of us.
Yeah.
And my husband he has this quote, and he would say, is it about being right or doing what's right?
Mm-hmm. And we talk about a lot of times giving up the right to be right.
Yes.
The self-righteousness of it all. And sometimes it's we can't see another person's point of view if we're more interested in being righteous.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And righteousness means provoked.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's amazing about his life. Oftentimes he was provoked. And he still stood his ground, but didn't give into the right to be right. Because if you hit me, I have a right to defend myself.
Exactly.
And he surrendered that right. And that's amazing to me, because usually if I know that what I'm saying is right or correct or righteous for me, or if I'm provoked or violated, my human rights are violated, my civil rights are violated, then I respond out of the right to be right. You know, and I think he's taught us, you know, one of the main lessons as I look back over his life and celebrate the day, the lesson he's taught me that even in the face of adversity, the time is always right to do what is right, and the outcomes will still be favorable.
Yes.
I think our children don't know that. I think this generation, as of right now, may or may not know that. May or may not know that, even though there's oppression, even though we have what's going on in the White House. I dare not say the P word. It's 45. What's going on 45? Okay. I can't. I don't say it privately, and I'm not going to say it publicly. What's going on with him? But I won't be disrespectful.
Right.
The time is always right to do right. And he can, what is right? And he can turn around.
He sure can.
At any point. And I think we need to just give him permission and opportunity. You know, because a lot of people, when he tries to do the right thing, because let's talk about what he did today. When he tries to do the right thing, we're going to ridicule him for trying, right? So the news caption reads, 45 shows up at MLK, his tomb, and stays for 2 minutes. A lot of people are going to say, yeah, that's just 45 being 45. What I'll say is, I'll take it. I'll take it. It's brief, but it's honorable. Because there's some things that he's done that's less honorable.
Yes.
Less than honorable. And so if you know, and whether it's newsworthy or not, I don't know. I'm not going to argue that, but it says his name, makes surprise visit to MLK Memorial, leaves after about 2 minutes. And a lot of people want to use that as a way to just ridicule him and talk about what he's not doing properly. But I'll tell you what, I'll take it as evidence of what Dr. King says. The time is always right to do what is right. And I think, you know, it says something. You know, maybe there's a glimpse of hope in there somewhere.
I think if we continue to pray, that there can be a change. There can be a change with that. But I have a question for you, Pastor Alva.
Yeah.
Do you think that Dr. King's dream is unfinished?
Well, I don't think I would say it was unfinished. I think it's a dream that is perpetual.
Okay.
I don't think it will ever be finished, and nor do I really want it to be, in the sense that I don't ever want us to forget the privilege of being able, well, you know, the truth of the matter is, how can it be forgotten? People are still coming to our country,
Mhm.
because in their country they can't do what they can do in our country,
Right.
which is what he fought for black kids and white kids and
Kids,
red kids and yellow kids and green kids to be able to play and worship and be together and live together and live in communities. And other people are leaving their country still in 2019
To come here.
to the land of the what? To the land of the free.
free.
So I think it's actually a work in progress, and maybe we're just farther along than most people in the world,
Right.
or most places in the world. So I don't think we can forget it. I don't think we have to redefine it. I don't think we have to redraw it. I think, but when we see violence and when we see prejudice and harm, when we see heinous things going on in the news, that we need to renew our faith and understanding of what the dream was about, and be aware of what he stood for and why a national holiday is necessary in the first place.
And I think we need to keep it in the forefront.
Yeah.
Because after today, then is it business as usual? So we have to make sure that we're keeping it in the forefront at all times, so it won't be forgotten until next January in 2020.
Right.
So if we keep it there, then I think we can make some substantial progress.
Yes. Still.
Yes.
Right. So we're reaching about 7:30 to 7:27. So for those of you who are just joining us, you have joined in the Frequency of Hope. Your host is Stephanie Clark, and I'm covering for her. I'm the guest host. My name is Pastor Alva Kershaw, and my co-host is Pastor Latrell Baker. We are taking calls on this show, and the number is 804-464-1089. And today we are talking about the reflections and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King on Martin Luther King Day, as it is observed in the United States. So for those of you who are joining us, we just wanted to bring you up to speed as to what we were talking about. And so the other thing that comes to mind, let me tell you what comes to my mind. What comes to my mind is what would, and I'm no expert, so callers out there, if you want to answer this question, please feel free to call us. Again, the number is 804-464-1089. What would Dr. Martin Luther King, there are two people I wonder if he could have a conversation with them. What would he say to 45? What would be his response to them? And what would the meetings and topics and his legacy and what he stood for, what would he have to say about the agenda of the current presidency, the current cabinet, the current officials, about some of the things that are in the news?
That would be an interesting conversation where I would love to be present. I think there would have to be the reminder of what this country was built on. I think there will have to be a greater reminder of love for everybody. But that it would be a very interesting conversation, because I wonder what 45's response would be.
Well, let's think about that, because one of the things I think that's very interesting is when he was voted into the office and had a meeting with the outgoing President Barack Obama, and President Obama said, let's have a conversation. And 45's response was to 44, his response was, oh, I thought this meeting would take about 15 minutes. And he says, okay, but it ended up lasting for more than several hours, like 2 to 3 hours. And 45 himself was very surprised that he could actually have a conversation. And I'm sure that people cut short conversations when they feel like they want to be in control, when they feel like there's nothing you can teach me or not anything that you can learn. And though we don't know all of the details, we do know that just by the length versus the brevity
Right.
of what he thought was going to happen, the length of the conversation, he was intrigued enough to stay. And I think that President Obama has a presence about him. And I think he may have even had a concern about handing over the mantle that maybe a lack of awareness our current president didn't have. And he says, no, I need you to understand what's happening. I need you to know that there are some things that you need to know, right, about what's going on. And so it's just very interesting. And he was very, the thing about 45, and this is why I think he probably would listen to Dr. King if he could have a conversation with him. He was very appreciative of the information, even though he was still, walking in arrogance and irresponsibility. He had an appreciation for what the outgoing president had to share with him, and said it was more than I thought I needed to know. But now I'm thankful. Right. And so I can only imagine the great Dr. King, if he had some wisdom to impart to to impart to 45. And so so Pence has a comment, and MLK's son responds, and the headline reads, MLK's son shuts down Pence. My father was a bridge builder, not a wall builder.
Wow.
And so that makes his son emotional, but he stands strong, and he says, my father was a bridge builder.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't trying to, he wanted people to cross over. He didn't want to keep people out. And I think, what are some of the issues when I think of building a wall in this day and age? And I think about the legacy of MLK. And I think about the legacy of African American people in this country, and how even in this country there are bridges that need to be built within the walls, and not more walls. Well, my response to that is, what can we do instead? When I think about building a wall, why are we keeping people out? Why do we not want people to come here? And I think if we spend more time answering those questions, right?
And I think it's for ignorance, because we don't understand other groups of people. And so the mindset is, if we can keep them out because I don't understand you, I don't want to take the time to understand you, so I'm going to keep you out. Because the reasoning for a wall, the reason that has been given, it lacks no validity. You're saying that it'll be more crime coming in, but we already have crime here.
Mm-hmm. That we're not doing anything about.
Exactly.
But justifying. I think one of the things that's interesting in this article is that the Vice 45, I still can't say Pence, the Vice 45, he's making the argument and weaponizing the I Have a Dream speech to justify Trump's wall, or 45's wall, saying that it is likened to the I Have a Dream speech. And his son's response, Martin Luther King's son's response is, my father was not a wall builder, but a bridge builder. And I think when we use things that are, holy, the I Have a Dream speech is a holy endeavor.
Yes.
It's a holy speech. It's a life-changing speech if you let it penetrate your soul, right? And we're going to use it to justify what he's doing. That is enough to clap back, snap back, yes. And to say, the quote says, Martin Luther King Jr. was a bridge builder, not a wall builder, said King, according to news outlets. Martin Luther King Jr. would say, love, not hate, will make America great. And that's true. We're just walking around in hate and not asking questions. And my response to that is, So we're not understanding the people that want to come to our country, and we're not asking enough questions about them. But I also think that once people are in our country, we're not making any attempts to educate them on who we are and what's acceptable. I think everything in this country is so punitive, and laws and rules and prison is the result of is the consequence of any law breaking. When in truth, we want to let people in this country, but we don't want to let them be a part of the government.
Right.
We don't want to let them be a part of the infrastructure. And if we do, it somehow has to only be to the benefit of certain groups. Right? So if you come to the country and you're going to undergird the government, but it's undergirded for the 1%, not undergirded for the 99%.
Right.
So you can participate in that, but it's usually underground and underneath, but never in a powerful position to actually make a change. So we are allowed to come to this country, whether you're brown, brown, black, or yellow.
Right.
Right. But you're not allowed to ever actually be a part of the country. Which is very interesting. So again, callers, we welcome you. It's about 7:36. We're taking calls. It's 804-464-1089. And we're talking about the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. And we are excited to share this time. I am a guest host. My name is Pastor Alva Kershaw. And my co-host is Pastor Latrell Baker. And we are covering tonight for Stephanie Clark on In the Frequency of Hope, and we're glad to be here tonight. So we welcome your calls. Please feel free to call in. Is there something you want to share? Quote? You have a quote first?
Yes, it was. Well, it's basically a perspective. As we celebrate today, looking at where we are in today's times, how far we've come, but we still have a long ways to go. And it reminded me of actually a video that I saw just the other day. It was some young kids from a Catholic school that had gone to visit, had gone to DC, and there was a Native American. He was an elder. And he was a sacred pipe holder. And so he did this ceremony every year, and how these young men taunted this man. And there was one that just stood there. All of them had their mega hats on, Make America Great Again. And so it was really disheartening, because the behavior that's perpetuated from one of the highest offices in the country is perpetuated in our youth. And so it was amazing. And so there were a lot of people that, responded out. It was on Twitter, and they responded out in, they were just disheartened by the behavior of our youth. And it just seems as though, with the behavior of the leader of this great country, it's now trickling down to our youth. And so all it does is just perpetuates the hate.
Yeah. Okay.
We have a Miss Love calling on tonight.
Okay, so we have a caller on the line. I understand it's Miss Love. Hi, my name is Pastor Alva Kershaw, and I welcome your call.
Hey, beautiful.
Hi.
Hi, beautiful madam. Wow, what a great night listening to you. Fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, talking about what we're going to do in this crazy world of, I just heard the person talking about how kids aren't being parented, nobody's home. I mean, who knows? Love is what helps us sort of be corralled as, human beings have to be raised,
Yes.
So many kids aren't being raised with love. So that's the tragedy, whether it's our psycho president or, our sibling or, these kids behaving violently, or the police, the murderers. There's just so much lack of love, creating all this epidemic of narcissism, epidemic of violence has been going on for thousands of years, but it's just getting worse and worse.
So if you had, now I have a question for you, because you have me curious.
Yeah.
So if you had to tell us one way that we could actually share love in the world, in face of all the hate, in face of all the problems that's going on, what would be the way that you would encourage us to be loving and to share love in the face of this injustice that's going on?
I have chills, because I mean, that's the question, and it's just such a layered question, because love isn't passive, right? As you know, right? Love, we don't just, some people, that don't understand, love is active, and it's activist, and it's fierce.
Yeah.
And yet love is also just this incredible, like, fragrance that's absolutely harmless, and it becomes this very intense topic, because it's it's like, what is love? I mean, you basically ask, what can we do? But then you have to ask yourself, well, what is love? Love is an action, first of all. No. Love is, it's not sitting on the couch and just like watching television and not participating. All the people are like, well, I'm fine, my life's not a disaster. Or maybe, it could be the person like, my life is a mess and I feel hopeless. And it's like, how do we summon love when we do feel hopeless? When we've already tried to change things, when we've already tried, when we're tired, maybe we are the victim. Maybe we have not necessarily been the biggest victim, but we've tried to make an effort. Like I just been Instagramming about ratifying the ERA. Well, nobody's talking about it. Kamala Harris put her thing up for becoming the president. Kirsten Gillibrand up for president. None of them have been announced on all these television shows. None of them talking about ratifying the ERA. It's up for vote. Like right now, women of all color, none of us are equal. And I guarantee you, I know I'm jumping all over this. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So, like, nobody's talking about this, like, publicly, and I could be very wrong because I'm not watching everything, but, the ERA movement is huge. And I think that this whole, I like to be a bit annoying and be an extremist a little bit, just to kind of, like, get people riled up. But I like to say that this whole law thing is going to stop as soon as this ERA thing is over. Like, as soon as the vote is, they didn't pass it, it's like everything's going to change. I'd love to be wrong, but it's like if all women of all colors were equal, had equal rights in the Constitution, that's huge. That is so huge. We're talking about Martin Luther King Day, and it's like, can we also include, it's not like the dishonoring Martin. He'd be like, yes, he'd be like the first person to say, let's make equal rights for women, because it's this huge distraction. We've got all these distractions to keep people from talking about ratifying equal rights amendment for all women, because they know that that's going to give women, all women, this gigantic power. I don't know. So love in action is being an activist. Love in action is smiling. Love in action is being kind where we weren't kind to ourselves. I mean, it's just like everything. Love in action is like saying, oh my God, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Or love in action is like, I don't know what to do, and I'm so mad at you, but like I know that's not the answer. Like, what can we do? Because we're fighting. This is whether it's our relationship, our mother, our siblings. But the problem is you have to have love in your heart in order to actually have a loving thought. And the problem is that people, in my mind, that's not being brought together in the discussion. There's all these segregated discussions. And there's like 1 million of them, or 100, or 10. There's like 10 really high red button topics right now, or 20, or whatever number you want to give it. And they're all segregated. They're all separate. And we have to cull it together and say, oh my God, this is one issue. And that's what the status quo wants. It wants us all to be in our own little corner, fighting in the ring about our own little private issue. And I don't mean private, like, it might be just our own, like my problem, fighting for my, or it might be just like, oh, the white problem. And I don't mean to sound terribly ignorant, you know, I don't know what it says. It's the black problem, the gay problem. And, you know, whatever our little corners are, or maybe we have a number of corners we're fighting in, it's all, if we could just, and I think most people that are activists really believe, hopefully, you know, maybe wishful thinking, but, you know, largely people are like, yeah, let's all get together. But how do we do it? How do we say, well, this is about, I'm jumping again. The problem to me is really, I'm just going to make this bold statement again, and in a second I could refute it or say something else, and, you know, because, you know, there's so many truths, but I'm just, the biggest problem that I see, and I think a lot of people see, is you've got healthy people that have love in their hearts, that are activists and trying to do stuff, and then also people that are overwhelmed and don't know what to do, or trying to do stuff, or tired, trying to pay the bills, got too many kids. And then you've got the psychopath, like our current president, and like the person with the mega hat that is standing in front of a Native American, you know, just horror. And then like the policemen that are shooting black people. I mean, just people that are mentally ill.
Yeah.
They have no remorse, or they don't seem to. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, and someone would be really mad at me. Should I stop talking and let you talk? I said a lot, so you talk. I'm going to stop talking.
Well, we thank you for your call and your feedback, and I do appreciate that. And I think your actual comments have just given voice to what is happening, and that is having so many stimuli, so having so many entry points into the conversation. But I think one of the most powerful things that we find is to pick one. I don't think we have to tackle every story or every argument. I think we just need to pick the one and focus on the one, because I think once we start to express love in one area, it permeates every other area. So if everyone would just pick one area, so if you picked one area and I picked another area, even if it's not the same area, but if we stayed in that focus and we just shared love in that way. While you were talking, one of our Facebook listeners said one of the ways that we could actually, you know, give love is more hugs. And that's true. Usually the only place we're going to hug is in church. And then you're going to be hugging somebody that you already know. What happens that in other gatherings and other settings that we would give hugs, or, you know, give a friendlier hello, or a friendlier engagement, rather than just the hi, how are you, the trite, the superficial. But if we were to go deep in some area of our lives, I think the paradox of choice is very active right now. And the paradox of choice is that we have so many choices that we don't make a choice at all. And I think so many people have choices, and we have the kids who are being disrespectful. We have the news media that's being disrespectful. We have the youth that are being disrespectful to other cultures. But if we were just to pick one area and shower it with love, I think that would change. So we don't have to fight every fight. But I think it's important that instead of us focusing on the fight, or the many fights, or the many battles that are occurring, that if we just created generals in every area and everywhere, we would win some fights. We would win some of these battles. I think there are politicians who are fighting with 45. I think that there are going to be some people who are going to give those kids some feedback, some pushback. And I think it's important that but not to assume. And the other problem is groupthink. Everybody's assuming that somebody's doing what nobody does. So I think if a group of people were to actually give some pushback to those kids and let them know this is not acceptable, we won't tolerate it, they'll stop. And a group of people needs to stand together and give and fight for ERA. But we need to fight where we're going to fight. And if you keep fighting in your area with love and understanding and awareness, we're going to win some of these battles for sure, for certain. We're going to make some progress. We're going to make some headway. We're going to have people like you calling in, listening to people like me, and vice versa. and giving you a place to talk and share your thoughts, and not ridiculing or saying that you're talking too much, but just, this is life. This is where we are. And this proves to us exactly where we are, that there's so much stimuli and so much information coming into us that we can't even make a choice. So I encourage you to give somebody a hug. I encourage you to pick a topic and stick with it and just fight that fight. And we will see a triumph. We will see us overcome. I think so.
So beautiful.
Well, thank you, Miss Love. We thank you for calling in.
You're the coolest. You're exquisite. You are love.
Well, thank
I'm so
you.
grateful. And the Work FM is the best radio station ever. And you are so sweet. You're permeating love in your voice, in every syllable, every eloquent thought. I just feel your love and your depth. And
Well, thank you.
so grateful that I am encountering you right now and having this beautiful gift of listening to you, and that you were patient with me. And I love that you're sharing this wisdom with everybody. And I am definitely one of those people that hugs people everywhere I go whenever I feel like it. And I hug strangers, not every stranger, but like, I've just been taking care of my mom for 9 years, 24/7. And I just lost her a month ago. And she was an opera singer and a little redhead. And everywhere we went, like, she just shone, and people were drawn to her. And we talked to everybody who wanted to talk to us. And that's how I never went anywhere without her. And she touched thousands of people. And anyway, so I definitely lived that already. And I love that you said it, and that you're inviting people, and you're making such a difference. And more power to you, and thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for
I
calling.
just wrote a book, by the way. It's all about love. It's called The Eternal Rose.
Eternal Rose. Well, thank you so much.
February 9th, the book people at 1 o'clock, if anybody wants to come. But it's all about that we are loved. We have to remember that we actually are loved, and that if we forget that, then we're not able to give it. But when we remember it, then it's like, oh, you know.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you for your call.
Thank you. You're so beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh my God, I'm so humbled hearing you just say everything that you said. If you need any help, let me know. I'm a friend of Max's, so let me know.
I will do that.
I'm really happy to help.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll have to help volunteer at the station. But I'll let you go. You got more people to talk to. And thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, thank you, Miss Love, for calling and listening in. We appreciate you, and we'll definitely keep you on our prayer list. Pastor Latrell and I, we pray a lot together, so we'll keep you on our prayer list about your mom. So we'll continue our reflections. We have another comment. Oh, okay. All right. So I have some other comments, and we'll continue with the show.
Okay.
You have another quote you want to share?
Well, actually, I wanted to touch on something that Ms. Love was speaking about in regards to women. And I found an interesting article from Katie Kindlin. It was on GMA, Good Morning America, and it was talking about remembering the women who helped MLK propel the civil rights movement. And of course, one of those women was his lovely wife, Coretta Scott King.
Yes.
And there's a quote from her that says, "I believe Martin was chosen. I believe I was chosen. And I say to the kids, this family was chosen as well." And this was posthumous, her memoir, My Life, My Love, My Legacy. And you have to imagine how hard it was for her to see her husband out there fighting for the civil rights for everybody. So she was a phenomenal woman, a phenomenal, for her to, persevere. And, even in her life after Dr. King passed, keeping his legacy alive.
Right. And raising their children.
Yes.
In sadness. And it's unfortunate, because that is the legacy of many African-American families and women. Not to mention other cultures. I have a Facebook participant Ryan R., and she says, Love is having the courage to take a pause and think about things from the perspective of others. To take a moment to step into the shoes of another, see what they see, feel what they feel. Love is opening your mind and then acknowledging that at the end of the day, we are all human. We are all the same color in the dark, and we all bleed red. Love is having the courage to step outside of yourself. And that is so beautifully said, and it is. And she also quotes with faith and spirituality, because this is MLK Day, and he was a pastor and had very strong faith in God. Corinthians 13:4-8, and she talks about how love is patient and kind. And that's amazing when I think about the fortitude it takes, because one of my favorite quotes with Dr. King is when he talks about what faith is. And faith is required to take steps when you don't see the big picture, to keep going when you don't know what the end is going to be. You're just hoping that it will be something that you want it to be.
Right. I remember seeing that quote. I was watching television one day, and it just posted on the television screen. Nothing else was said. And I couldn't grab my phone fast enough, but I wanted to take a picture of that because I thought it was amazing. And it just, it speaks loudly to the scripture. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen.
Right.
And so it was. I thought that was awesome. And then for you to, to read that quote now, it just brought that back to me. Because, faith, even if you don't see it, you got to keep going.
You have to keep going.
Even if we don't see any good thing coming from 45.
Yeah, like Miss Love said,
yes.
It's hard in the face of adversity to keep going. But let's talk about something that's on my mind. One of the things and this brings up a topic, it kind of like floated up, the hope floats idea. So one of the things I want to talk about is I was listening in more recent times to thought leaders having a conversation, and Oprah is one of my favorite people, and I can't even remember who she was talking to, but I remember having a conversation, and he says one of the question that he asked really stuck in my mind. He says, can you use your life towards your energies, your resources, towards something that you will never get to see come to fruition? So we know that Dr. Martin Luther King's his speech, he says, I've been to the mountaintop, and that he almost prophesied in his own death that he would not make it, that he would not see the promise that we are going to realize and dream. And I often wonder, because sometimes we can invest, just like you just said, you have to have courage, you have to have faith, you have to have hope to, plow forward. But I think a lot of the things that we have faith and we plow forward in, we also have a belief that in this lifetime, we're going to see the fruit. That in this lifetime, we're going to see it come to pass, right? But what happens when you know that I am giving all that I have to a cause, right? That I may never see, come to pass.
I think with that, we still have to give our all, because you have the mindset of some people that say, okay, well, I'm not going to see it come to pass. I won't see it come to fruition, so I'm not going to invest that much. But if you keep the mindset of the generations that are coming behind you, even if you don't get to see it, those that have come up behind us, they will be the ones that will be able to benefit from the investments that we made. Because I mean, even with that mindset, you think about it, okay, why would I have an investment portfolio.
Right. Because
I'm not going to see the money. But the Bible tells us to leave an inheritance for our children.
Right.
And so my investment in something that I may not see come to pass is an inheritance for my children, my children's children, and my children's children. So I'm going to give my all.
Give my all.
Even if I know I won't see it.
When I thought about it, I said, of course I can. Because at first I paused, but then my answer was like, of course I can, because anything that I do will be a legacy for 7 generations.
Right.
They can live off of your energy, off of your accomplishments, off of the things that you've done in this lifetime. But I think also what's equally as important is to tell it. Someone has to tell the story.
Exactly.
Someone has to be present to share why life is important, why investment is important, why it's important not to just be about yourself, but to build your community.
Right.
I think a lot of times when I think of some of the things or some of the tragedies that I feel like in this lifetime could have been prevented, it's because there were no relationships and there were no real communities. And we didn't pay attention to one another's needs, and we didn't pay attention to one another's pain. We just kind of ignored it and swept it under the rug. And I think, again, anybody who feels like building a wall or not building a wall will affect them, because it's not my family that's being kept out. Right? But what happens when not building the wall shuts down the government and your family is not getting paid? Right.
Exactly.
So it does affect you. So, Dr. King wanted, and I'm paraphrasing, because I think the quotes are important, but the paraphrases are equally as important, because that's how it affects your life. Injustice to one, or injustice anywhere.
Where is injustice everywhere?
Right. And that just speaks to the legacy of don't just stand by and think that the wall's not going to affect you, because a $5.7 billion debt affects us all.
Yes, it does.
Oh, it's the top of the hour.
Yeah, you can do the recap, station ID.
All right. Here we are. This is WRWK 93.9 FM, community radio, building a bridge, city to county, left to right, neighbor to neighbor. Engage, volunteer, and support. Find us on Facebook, The Work FM, and on our website,
TheWorkFM.org.
TheWorkFM.org. And we're also, today, the show is about MLK, the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. And my name is Pastor Alva Kershaw, and I am co-hosting today with Pastor Latrell Baker. And we are filling in for Stephanie Clark, who graciously offered this day for us to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And the name of this show is In the Frequency of Hope. If you want to join us or have questions, please call us 804-464-1089. So welcome back to the show. We're here having a wonderful conversation about the life and legacy of Martin Luther King and what we think some of his thoughts would be today, and how his life and legacy have impacted us and our families and our legacies, especially and specifically. Let's talk about being pastors and the power of the pulpit, because he used his pulpit very well. Like, it was like when you go back to read his speeches and read some of his sermons, they're powerful.
Yes. He made a tremendous impact in the church, because even what he spoke from the pulpit, he spoke and it rang so loudly throughout the community. So it wasn't that he would preach one thing but then speak on something else. He had the continuity of his sermons about love, about equality, about mankind. And so it just rings so loudly as to who he was. And it was, you were spoke before in regards to how things affect us directly and indirectly. And I have a quote here from his letter from the Birmingham City Jail, where he says, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." And so when you spoke about this wall may affect one group, but because there's no funding for it, it's affecting the other group on the other side of this wall that he wants to build.
I find it, that is one of my favorite quotes. Read that again for me.
"We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly."
And the rest of that quote, which this one I pretty much know by heart, it says, "And I cannot be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you cannot be what I ought to be, what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be." And this is the interrelated destiny that we share. And it's a quote that I remember going down to the Martin Luther King Center in Atlanta, visiting, and that's sacred. That's a sacred space when you go down there.
I went there.
It is absolutely beautiful.
Yes.
And it is one of the quotes that they have on a postcard. And I never forget the mutuality, that you cannot be great until I am great. And I cannot be great until you are great, which means that I don't have to hold you back.
Right.
Like I can support you and love you because I can't be what I'm supposed to be until I do.
Exactly.
This country can't be great again. It's so interesting that, if we go there to make this country great again, it can't be great until we love one another. Until we walk in love, until I see your needs as a part of mine. And when I see that my life being comfortable and satisfying and successful, that doesn't happen until I allow your life to be comfortable, gratifying and successful. And that we don't have to, because we live in such a scarcity mindset. It seems like the more we have, it's almost, again, the paradox of choice. The more choices we have no choice at all. The more resources we have in this life and in this community, in this world, it seems the less we have. All the information moving at the speed of light on the internet, and yet we have no more love and no more ability to love than before. And we just have to, do the inside job. One of the things I wanted to share was just reading up on the holiday, which was signed into law by President Ronald Reagan in 1983, but it was first observed 3 years later, right? And of course, we knew that some of the states resisted observing the holiday, giving it alternative names and combining it with other holidays. But it was officially observed in all 50 states for the first time in 2000. That was just 19 years ago. And we were adults.
Yes.
19 years ago. And that's just amazing to me. And our children just have no idea, like, the power of this. I think it's just the same way that people who President Barack Obama was voted in 2008, and we had our first African-American president, right? And then my daughter in 2008, she was 5.
Mine was 3.
So mine was 5, right? So they're 5 years old, and they have no idea of the major impact that this is having on the world, and that there are people who are 100 years old who saw him become president, who had never voted, who voted for the first time. Some amazing things happened when he became, and I think, so we can talk about this. I think that MLK Day is one of the reasons that was even possible.
Yes.
MLK Day and just his life, his legacy, who he was, made it possible for us to vote in an African-American president in this country.
And even for him to say, I want to run for president.
And
I want to run for office.
so there is Senator Harris who is running for
Kamala?
Yes,
I saw
and
that.
she
has already put her bid in.
2020 African American woman running for president.
Yes.
I mean, I'm excited, but I know that I'll stay away from the news outlets when this is happening because I cannot take on the negativity that's going to
Yeah, she announced that today. California Senator.
I saw that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
California Senator announced her bid on Martin Luther King Jr. Day with the campaign theme "For the People." Senator Harris is a Democrat from California, and she announced that she will be running for president in 2020. And her theme again is "For the People," and she is expected to formally announce her candidacy in a speech on January the 27th in Oakland, California.
Well, this is going to be an amazing time for us. I'm going to have to, thicken up a little bit, thicken your skin up, callers and listeners out there in Virginia, because it's going to be a ride. I think,
yes.
But I think what I'm more interested in hearing, is who's going to be a running mate. How are they going to do that?
Yeah.
That's going to be interesting. So if she's a front runner and she's running for president, I wonder who her running mate will be. Yeah, so I'm excited about that.
That's a good question. But she says she loves her country. And this is a moment in time that she feels a sense of responsibility to stand up and fight for the best of who we are.
So the forever floaters, I can't even call her the forever floaters, Mrs. Michelle Obama, and the media mogul of the world, Miss Oprah Winfrey. Neither of them are willing at this point, right? Because they have more freedom doing what they're doing right now to be impactful. And so that just says, okay, because that would have been great.
Yes.
That would have been great. That would have been a great thing to see. But that's just my bias. So we're talking today about the legacy and life of Martin Luther King, and that quote that you read, it is my absolute favorite about. And I had no knowledge that it was written from the Birmingham jail, but that interrelated connectedness of human mutuality. I think that's the word, human mutuality. That's what it means. That's what it is. We can all be great. We can all be great.
Yes, we can.
And we just have to give each other permission to do so. Right?
But I think our country has always been great. And of course, 45 ran on the theme, "Make America Great Again." But a question that I will have for him is, when did America stop being great? That he felt the need, that he was the one that would be able to make it great again.
Yeah, and I think that's all based on the fear legacy. If one group is that whole interrelated mutuality, resistance, and destiny, if one is doing well, then that must mean that we are not doing well. Not that we can all do well.
Right.
I think there always has to be winners and losers, and I think that we just need to do away with that mindset, as Miss Love said, and just be love and do loving things. And like our Facebook friend said, Ryan R., love is being able to see it from the other person's point of view and to consider it. The other thing is that we all are the same color in the dark.
Yes.
And so we just need to consider some of these things about the way that we see race, the way that we see the MLK holiday, and just what it means and what it isn't, and even what it is not, and even what it's not. Okay. So we welcome callers. We welcome Facebook comments. Okay. Our number is 804-464-1089. Again, the phone number is 804-464-1089.
Well, Pastor Alva, I ran across another quote.
Okay, I'm listening. I'm ready.
And this one It's it was a preview of The Dream at the Detroit March. And he said, if a man hasn't discovered something he will die for, he isn't fit to live.
Isn't that awesome?
So what do you think about that one?
Well, we have a caller. We'll
Okay.
get back to that. Let's take our caller. I'm sorry.
So we have Chris.
We have Chris on the line.
Yes.
Hi,
You guys
Chris.
can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Excellent. Yeah, I was just listening to the pre-program stuff earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a really amazing interview where they talked about how working class whites largely, because they outnumber everybody else, working class whites have been convinced to find hate against blacks and other people of color by being manipulated by the 1%, because that way they can keep them from finding solidarity with their fellow workers and thereby not challenge the 1% on things like low wages, no benefits, that we could have possibly have had universal health care back in the Nixon years. But Nixon used the Southern strategy to scare a critical mass of whites to not find community with people of color that were working just the same as they were. And so literally we have a situation where whites are literally carving off their nose to spite their face. And we've had millions of people of every color and gender dying by the millions for decades because of that racism. So racism absolutely harms people of color disproportionately. But it's not like whites don't also have terrible results. And so, you know, I think if we could make that point better, that everybody involved in racism is suffering, albeit differently, and not at the same scale, but that nobody really is benefiting from this except a very thin slice of 1% at the top, or even less than 1%. And I think that case needs to be made probably by white people to other white people, but so, you know, they might not hear it from you, but maybe they'd hear it from me or someone else. But I think it's another approach that, you know, I think maybe that's why Martin Luther King, some other people, not me, have noted that Martin Luther King was assassinated immediately after starting the strike, bringing people's awareness to the garbage collectors strike. And I think what they're saying is, hey, as long as Martin Luther King is saying, hey, don't be mean to black people, 1%'s like, yeah, okay, we're not thrilled, but whatever. But as soon as he started getting whites and blacks together on labor issues, that's when the 1% said, oh, no, we can't have that. That cannot happen. And so I'm not the originator of that thought. I'm just passing it on. I wish I could remember who the author was so I could give them attribution, but I don't remember. So I think that would be one of the things I would say to fellow whites is, you know, this is really about a small number of people playing the rest of us against each other so that they benefit. And my analogy to that is like a bunch of rich folks have got these fighting chickens, and they're going to throw them in this ring, and there's a black chicken and a white chicken and a different colored chicken, and they're laying bets as to which one gouges out the eyes of the other. But they always go home with our eggs and a chicken in every pot.
You're absolutely correct. We thank you.
Chris.
We thank you, Chris, for your call, your feedback. That's awesome. That's a lot for us to talk about. My question to you is, if you had to give one suggestion about how to even begin to tackle that awareness as a white person, because I've heard you make the distinction between not me and you, but you could maybe say that to white people. If you were in a conversation with another white person and you wanted to bring this home, what is something that you could enlighten them about to make them aware of this situation?
I try, and my approach is always going to be tailored to the individual, and so I'm gonna code switch. You know, if I'm at a construction site, I'm going to use different words than if I'm in a college setting. But I try, and you know, my results are highly variable. Sometimes I make no headway at all, and they call me communist and stuff like that. And then other times, I kind of see a little light bulb go off, and they say, I hadn't thought of that. You know, so I get a variety of responses.
Okay. Well, be encouraged. We appreciate your call, and we're gonna think about that. That's a lot to think about. But you're absolutely right. I believe that there's always been that the powers that be that offer, you know, the greatest division because it benefits them the most. So we thank you for your call and your feedback.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you. So our caller, you know, he's been thinking about that. He says, amongst white people, from one white person to another, that he feels like they just need to be enlightened and understood that they're playing both of the ends of the spectrum against the middle, so that we'll be divided and conquered, because we know that division, more than one vision, causes a house to fall, right? And so I'm going to agree with George W. Bush, when he says we're just too strong for that. You know, we're just too strong. You know, there are things that can happen. And I can't remember what George W. was saying in response to, but we're just not going to let these things divide and what will destroy us.
Right.
I mean, we're divided as a country sometimes, but I think ultimately we come back together. And I agree with him. Great thought leaders, great activists, great people such as Martin Luther King Jr. are assassinated when they realize that I was on the end of the spectrum that I was on because I was filled with hate.
Right.
I was filled with fear. And once that hate and that fear is taken away and
they feel threatened.
Yeah, because now I am love. Now I can love, and it doesn't matter your color, creed, age, race. It doesn't matter our individual attributes. I just see you as a person. And when you can do that, you're dangerous. You are a dangerous human being to have on the planet for the powers that be.
Right. And I think we just need to continue to have dialogue, even within the white community. You know, as Chris was saying, you know, he's talked to other, you know, people in his community, but they need to continue to have dialogue in regards to that, so that they will get a better understanding.
Right. And have opportunities to actually express it. Because again, that's what Miss Love was saying. Like, how do you eradicate? How do you bite the big pink elephant in the room? Right. But I like to tell you what my mom used to tell me, and she says every journey begins with a single step, and every accomplishment in my life has begun with a single step. Like having this conversation, and I think I'm going to be committed even more next year to have my children recognize and be aware. But I think also there are opportunities coming up. Right. There are opportunities in February for Black History Month. Right. But there are opportunities every day. Yes.
You know, don't let us just have it encapsulated in just 1 month.
But I think, but see my struggle again. When we opened the show, I had to admit that my struggle with that is to be able to celebrate the life, the legacy, the accomplishments of Dr. Martin Luther King in this country without traumatizing my children and without being recognized or seen as aggressive or angry all the time. Right. Because the story is steeped, or his legacy is produced out of adversity, right? But one of the quotes I just found, which I love the internet stuff, but it says, he says, "We are not makers of history. We are made by history." That's beautiful. I love that. And so when I think about what will, before our caller, we had a quote, we had a question that we were talking about. Your quote. What was the last quote you read?
About if a man hasn't discovered something he will
Yes.
die for, he isn't fit to live.
As a bit of lady, you were asking me what I thought about that. And then we'll go back to this quote. If a man does not,
If a man hasn't discovered something he will die for, he isn't fit to live.
I think that's one of the more powerful. It's a powerful quote, but it makes you stand up for something.
Yes.
And he says discover, so you have to figure it out. So if you've lived any amount of years in this world, I think you must find something that you're willing to die for.
And I think if you want your life to matter, you have to find something that you believe in, something that you are willing to die for. And that's what Martin Luther King, that's what his life was. He was willing to stand up and die for what he believed in.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because he was willing to die for what he believed in, even though he had children. And I think for me, I don't know. I tell you, I think he was one of the bravest people on the planet.
Yes. Because he knew his life was always in danger.
Always in danger. And he did it anyway. But so did our president.
Yeah.
And he does it anyway. And I'm talking about my president.
Yeah.
Barack Obama. I'm not sure what the current cabinet or administration is doing, but to know that your life is constantly under fire and you're willing to fight it anyway. And I think that's encouraging. It's encouraging for me to keep on moving.
Yes.
And not to give up because we are here now.
Yes.
We're not where we started from. See, a lot of people would have us to believe because there is adversity that we are where we started from. We're not.
No, we're
not. Oh, we have a caller coming in. We're not where we started from, and neither do we ever need to believe that we are. Exactly. We are not. We've made many accomplishments in this country. We've done a lot.
Yes, we've made tremendous strides.
And we do it every day. We have a caller on the line.
We have Leslie.
We have Leslie on the line. Welcome, Leslie.
How are you? I want to thank you so much for doing this program tonight. And I appreciate both of you ladies and what you're talking about and saying. And I really can't imagine what Martin Luther King would say to number 45. I don't know how he could be tolerant, but he was a tolerant man. So, geez, I'm sure he would have some kind of great wisdom, but I don't know that I could come up with it because I so don't like this person. He's so horrible. I just can't imagine saying something nice to him.
Well, we thank you for that feedback, and we appreciate it. And I think, I think that is a challenge to say something lovable and loving to a person that we have deemed unlovable. But I remember, this is what I'll say. I remember when, so I'm a pastor, but I'm also a licensed clinical therapist. And one of the things, and this is not, even though my title is there, I'm not giving any counseling advice, so I just have to say that. But one of the things that I remember when he was, the night that he was elected, I remember thinking, I felt sorry for 45. And I felt sorry for him because he's a narcissist. And you hold, as 45, he holds the most powerful position in the world. Not just our country, but in the world. And you are, at that point, he is he feels like the smallest person on the planet. So even that can't satisfy your soul. And so when I think about this wounded, injured human being, I think to myself, the one loving thing I could say to him would be, I apologize to you for having to suffer whatever injustice, whatever sadness, whatever hurt thing that happened to you that caused you to be this person, that you cannot even be satisfied with all your money, with all your riches, and even holding the greatest office in the country, that you still have the little man complex and syndrome, that you would have to hurt another person, another human being. I just remember.
Well, that is a wonderful thing to say to him, for sure. I just don't see any redeeming qualities about him, and I don't
Right.
think he is receptive to trying to be a better person or
Right.
trying to even accept love.
Right.
So I don't know how anyone could break through to him.
And I think the important part, Leslie, is not that we actually break through, but that we put out in the world who we are. I think too many times we let people like Donald,
45.
number 45. I think we allow him to speak his truth and his hate and spew it, and we don't speak enough.
Mm-hmm.
We don't stand up to say, you know what, I'm not that person. And even though I might be in his tax bracket, even though I might be in his race, even though I might have some similarities, I may have like the same sports team he does, I'm not him. And I don't believe the things that he says. I do not believe that it is okay to build a wall. I do not believe that it's okay to separate families and deport people unjustly. I do not believe that to be disrespectful to the office, that is just not acceptable. And so I think that people like you just need to make more effort to get your voice known and know that it's important that as much as he has a platform, we have a platform too, and we have a voice too, and we matter too, and you know, we're part of this great American country too. Mm-hmm. So just we're gonna fight the fight. I'm just not gonna let him win. I can't. And it doesn't matter that he doesn't have any redeeming quality. What matters is that you do, and I do, and that we are here too, and we're gonna fight the fight. So that's good.
That's right, and I thank you for those great words.
Thank you so much.
I'm trying to every day.
Yes.
I'm going to keep on, and I'm going to spread the word just like you're doing tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Leslie.
Thank you for being on.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's one of the most important. Things that we can do.
Yes,
is
we have
to
to
not.
we have to speak our truth.
Because even though he has a million platforms,
yes,
which is not always good, we have to utilize the one. We have some callers on the line. Okay. Okay. Well.
We had two coming in. Here, let's do this one. Let me speak about this one.
All right. Who's our caller?
This is Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie's on the line.
Well, hello there, Alva and Latrell. Thank you so much for coming in tonight and hosting the show.
Oh, thank you for having us. We're excited
I really
to be here.
appreciate you guys being willing to come in and share your view.
Well, thank you so much.
I've been listening since you guys got started because I was really excited just to hear what you had to say about Dr. King and his legacy. And sorry, I'm getting waves to move further away. I think I'm interfering with the radio somewhere else in the house. Anyway, what I was thinking about when I was listening to a little bit of the stuff earlier, particularly this energy around, you know, the crossover between maybe what we see as our personal lives, you know, when we think about our spirituality or our faith, we tend to think of that really more in terms of our personal lives rather than how it might affect our civic duty, as you, were talking about with tonight's title. And my thought in that was, you know, how we go about in the world, as you were talking about. But sometimes it becomes very difficult when someone has so offended our sensibilities. And the thought that came to me was, for me, it becomes very difficult to genuinely hold someone in a space of prayer if I can't really acknowledge them and let them be who they are. And that is my challenge. Anyway, I also wanted to share with you one of the other things that I got early this morning when I looked at today's calendar from Dr. Wayne Dyer.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, practice wanting for others what you want for yourself by being Christ-like rather than a Christian, Muhammad-like rather than a Muslim, and Buddha-like rather than a Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that very powerful, that selection of that quote for today in celebration of Martin Luther King Day, because I think that speaks very well to the way that he carried himself. And those were my thoughts so far. And I'm just so excited to hear you doing the show tonight. It's just very cool.
Well, thank you so much. And those are awesome thoughts. And you are absolutely correct. I do understand your feelings, and that's amazing to just be able to process this. So we appreciate your feedback and calling in and supporting us. And thank you again for asking us to do this. This has been wonderful.
And thank you for accepting and taking charge with it, because it's been such a wonderful show. I am going to let you ladies go because I know you have another call waiting. Good night.
All right,
Good night.
Thank
you.
I think we lost the other call.
Okay, so we lost the other call, but caller, if you want to call back, please call us. But to talk about what Stephanie was saying, that her quote, well, there are two things. She says it's hard to remember someone in prayer when they have
offended.
The same thing with Leslie when she says no redeeming qualities.
Right.
You just kind of feel a certain and specific type of disdain for the person, hatred, if you will. And I think about that, especially being a pastor.
Yes.
You know, being called to shepherd people who come to you with unforgiveness in their heart, and not unwarranted. You know, this is very provoked and provocative. He's provocative. And yet I think to myself, how do you begin to tackle that? How do you begin to, which brings me to another quote, and we'll get back to the second part of her comment. The other quote is, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? This is one of the 10 most quotes, like highly recognized quotes with the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King. What are we doing for others? And I think all I can do, because even if I can't pray for 45, what I can do is pray for myself. And what I began to pray, because you know, one of my favorite real life quotes is what Whoopi Goldberg says, and I think it's about your interrelated destiny in the color purple. She says, what you've done to me is already done to you.
Yes.
Right. So we talked about with Leslie that that 45 is narcissistic, you know, and narcissism comes from undeveloped character. And they come off as grandiose and that they're the greatest person in the world. And they do that because they feel like they're the least of these. And so when I think about who he is and how I could pray for him, when I can pray for him, what I pray for is myself in regards to him. Right. My heart is hard towards him. I'm angry about who he is and what he does. But I'm even angrier at the people who voted him in, you know. And so I pray for all of them through myself. Right. by saying, give me wisdom. Give me understanding as to how this could happen. Right. And I think it very well could happen because if I were in the position where my earlier caller, Chris, called in, right? He called in and said, we have been manipulated to believe that somehow an opportunity that belonged to me has been taken from me. Right. Then I think I could vote him in too. If he comes in promising, hey, I'm going to make this America great for you again. Right. The people that have been disenfranchised, you, the person who's lost your position, who's fallen from grace. I'm going to make it great again for you. Why not get behind the curtain and vote for him? And so while I have understanding and wisdom, what I also ask for is the courage in the face of adversity to be able to express and embody an enduring love, so that when it's over, I'm not hateful. But when he's out, because we got to remember, no matter what happens, the max he can be there is 8 years. Right. And I think the last presidency, this is what we're seeing. People who don't understand how to process and live through hate. But people don't understand. African Americans in this country have lived through hate for 400 years. and we still love.
Yes.
You know, and people don't
Isn't that
understand.
amazing?
It is amazing. And you need to be able to look at that. When you have a legacy of foolery for 400 years, and we still say this is the greatest country in the world. It's the only country I know. It's my home.
It's the country that tried to hold us down.
But it's the country where I'm the best that I can be. There's nowhere else for me to go. You can't build a wall. For me, you can't send me anywhere. You can't deport me anywhere. This is my home.
Right.
And I still have to make it. And so that it gives a whole new meaning to making lemonade out of lemons.
Mhm.
You know, we are here.
Yeah,
We
we
are
ain't going
here, and we're
nowhere.
not going anywhere. And so we might as well learn to love. Because
Yes.
I don't want to birth 7 generations
Of
of
hate.
hateful people, because it eats you, and then we're ravaged with disease and discomfort. And you got to say, you know what? For such a time as this, we were created to be here. And it's time for us to do a work,
Yes.
be the work right here on
Make
Work
that
FM.
investment.
That's right.
And do all the
radio
radio
shows.
Yes.
And allow the people, we've had some wonderful callers
Yes.
tonight. That have questions and have opinions and have, you know, comments that they want to make, and they just want it to be received. But I think what's most important, I think all of our callers, if I'm not mistaken, have been white.
Mhm.
That want that information received by African Americans.
Right.
That want it received. That want us to know that they're not 45.
Exactly.
You
They
know,
want us to know that's not
That's
because
not
of
who I am.
who he is.
Right.
That's not who I am.
Right, because I remember one call, and I can't remember exactly, but I wanted to write it down. I think one of the things that was embedded in our conversation was, I think I'm angriest because he is a representation of white America.
Right.
And everybody thinks that that's all
everybody, but it's
who's
not.
white America. And I can't hide from that, because if I'm white and I'm out in the public, then people are going to assume that I think like him,
Right.
and I don't. That's not who I am. You know, that I'm a loving person, right?
Right.
It is embarrassing.
He and our guy, it is embarrassing, and I get it, but that's why I think it's important to start seeing, as much as we see communities, to understand that even within a community, not all people think
the same way.
The same way. They don't think alike. That's important, right?
Yes, definitely.
You got another quote?
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
Yeah. Oh, the second part before we do.
Okay.
I want Stephanie's comments to go. He said to be Christ-like, to be Muhammad-like, and to be Buddha-like versus religious.
Mhm.
Because the religions that come after are full of rules. Because what they're going to tell you is how to be them.
Right.
How to do it.
Mhm.
And I think rules are always a shortcut from the truth.
Wow.
So a playbook is always a shortcut for how to be in the truth.
Right.
When you just need to go back to the truth and figure it out for yourself. And that's how you get to be Christ-like, Buddha-like, and Muhammad-like,
Right.
versus religious folks. Right.
Mm.
So we need to learn the rules for ourselves and not let people interpret the rules and give them to us.
Amen.
Right. And so this is having so much fun. And this is, and that's the thing, because a lot of people will be like, we say it, and I don't want it to be trite. I don't want it to become a cliche. I don't want it to be just something else we say. Let's be Christ-like. Well, that's not a rule.
Right.
That's not a religion. That's a way of being in the world.
Yes.
Right. And I think it's too much work. Everybody's looking for the shortcut. Everybody's looking for the rules. And so if I just clap my hands, spin around, and pet my tummy, my belly all at the same time, then I'm saved.
Instead of doing the work.
Instead of doing the work, understanding that forgiveness is a work.
Yes. And you can't do it in your own strength.
You can't. And we, at the top of that, we didn't refresh people who are joining us mid-conversation. We are here hosting on the Work FM. We're hosting in
the Frequency of Hope.
The Frequency of Hope. And our host is Stephanie Clark. We're standing in. My name is Alva Kershaw. I'm Pastor Alva Kershaw. And I have Pastor Latrell Baker here today. And we are talking, because we're so caught up in our conversation,
Yes.
We are talking about the life and legacy of Martin Luther King and all of how it affects our faith, our spirituality, our civic duties, how it affects how we live in the world, how it affects our decision-making process, how it affects how we raise our children, how it affects how we
Just live our lives day
live
to
our
day.
lives open, even find joy and happiness,
Yes.
right? And so we are welcoming callers. The number here is 804-464-1089. We have about 15 more minutes for the show, and so we are welcoming.
Can I talk?
Oh, yes. Ian has something that he has to say. We welcome him.
I am not on
Absolutely.
the phone, but if I was near a phone, I'd be calling you. But since you're right here, I just intrigued what I'm hearing.
Okay.
So I just want to kind of reflect on what you just said, and it reminds me of, the whole Christ-like, Buddha-like, and being spiritual and having a relationship with God versus religion, and put that in the context of MLK and 45. So you put all that in the mixing bowl, you come out with a lot of questions. So how, as pastors, I think that what is universal, universally attractive about Martin Luther King Jr. was that he does come across as Christ-like, and he's I mean, he seems to walk in the shoes. He's walking the walk, he's talking the talk.
Yeah.
And so when you ask yourself, like most people do, what would Jesus do? I'm sure in the Middle East they're saying, what would Muhammad do?
Right.
And I think about that constantly when I'm reading these blogs and hearing these stories about the evangelicals. So as pastors, I wonder, how do you guys reconcile? How do you guys deal with this idea that Jerry Falwell and Liberty University and all these mega churches, and they're behind 45, and the man is he's not washing the feet of prostitutes. He's sleeping with them and stuff. So I don't see this guy as something that is doing what Jesus would do. So how do good Christians kind of get hoodwinked or whatever into supporting him? And how do you all as pastors feel like your fellow Christians are being, how do they reconcile on that? How does they think, when you said, what would Jesus do? Everything that 45 does is the opposite, in my mind, of what Jesus would do. So how do you feel like these people are supporting him in these big mega churches and Liberty University? I know it's a big question, but I struggle with that a lot.
I
don't want to throw you a curveball.
No, I think for me, like if I just had to go off the cuff, which I'm going, I think it's a matter of it's easier to follow the rule than it is to go off the beaten path. Because to figure out what Christ would do means that you have to go against what they are actually saying in church, right? So I'm newly installed at the Way of the Lord Fellowship Church, and as of yesterday, I'm one of the pastors there. And what I found, thank you. One of the things that I find, and Dr. Henderson is the other. One of the things that I find is that a lot of times you have to go against what the status quo is and what people told you God is. And I think that's a lonely place. I've been called a lot of things. I'm not your typical pastor. I'm certainly not. Even just from being a female pastor in and of itself, you've been ridiculed. But I think, one of the jokes is one of the famous, these rap songs says, I started from the bottom and now I'm here.
Right.
When you start from a place where people are always telling you what you cannot do, what you will not do, what is not for you to do, you find yourself at a place where it doesn't matter then. Like I don't have to follow the rules. I don't have to fit into a mold or anything. And I think a lot of these people in these mega churches are accustomed to fitting into molds, and they're fitting into the crowd. And so one of the things, a famous pastor in Richmond, a local famous pastor, he says, and I won't call this church name because I want to misquote him, put him on Front Street, but he said, the problem with mega churches, which his is, which is interesting, he says it's easy to hide. He says you can hide, you can get lost, you can claim yourself to be a member of my church and bit more do nothing in my church. Not even come to church on Sundays, but claim that you are part of the flock because it's such a big church, but nobody can actually identify you. And I think these mega churches are big faces that nobody can identify.
Right.
And behind closed doors, people are one thing, but in the face of something,
And
there's
that's
something
something
else. And it's easy to go into the Jerry Falwells until it's your family, until you are directly impacted by what is happening. And so I don't think there's any one easy answer. I don't think those people are on the radio either. You know, they're not on the radio. People don't know them individually by name. They just know Falwell, his name. They know 45 in his name. But when it starts to become personal and you're identified individually, right? I think you hide in the fray. I think people just kind of hide. What do you think?
Well, I think it is, for me, I think it's a thing of money and power. Because if you stand in the pulpit and you're preaching Christ and you're preaching love, and 45 is not remotely demonstrating that, it has not demonstrated that even on the campaign trail. You can, in your heart of hearts, believe that this is right for the church, because what he's spewing out is a perpetual hate, and that's not what Christ was about. So to stand in the pulpit and publicly and in the world, stand publicly and support and promote, then that makes me question, do you really believe what you stand in the pulpit and preach?
I have the same thoughts. I don't understand how you can be a man of the cloth or a woman of the cloth and support the guy who's putting children in cages and separating them from their mothers. That's the least Christian thing I can think of. And so I just really struggle with some of the people in the base that claim to be the most Christian constituency in America, and I just don't think that they are really representing. I just don't feel like they're. I don't know. There's some cognitive dissonance. Something. There's a real disconnect. I can't figure out how that's working, because I don't believe that. I believe these people believe that they're Christians. I don't believe that in my heart that they are walking in the footsteps of Christ and doing what I believe is Savior. Or what I know about Jesus is quite a bit different than what I'm saying today.
I think Stephanie Clark made a good, an important argument. She says to be Christ-like and not Christians. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is cognitive dissonance. And we do have a caller in line.
WRWK.
We're just going to pause for a second and take this call. Who's that call?
It's Chris again. Something invoked his interest.
Okay, Chris is calling back. Hi, Chris. Welcome to. Yes.
Yes, thank you. There was another fascinating show earlier in the week that talked about how Trump creates this ecstatic effect. That was the phrase used in the show. This ecstatic effect that is normally attributed to some preachers and some cult leaders. And so logic is completely irrelevant to why people support Trump. It's not about logic. It's about triggering that emotional, and the phrase you hear over and over is, oh, finally, somebody in power speaks my mind. I mean, it's almost verbatim. You hear that over and over again. And I think what it is these are very damaged people in many cases who have always felt like there was nobody in any position of power that spoke how they felt. And rather than question how they felt, they just keep looking for somebody who will speak their mind from a position of power, and finally they have it. And this is where they get that ecstatic effect. They're like, oh, he gets me, he understands. And so I think one of the big problems in America is, one of many problems, is that we do not have a reflective culture. We do not have a culture that encourages people to take some time out of chasing the dollar or chasing the status or having the biggest boat or the biggest whatever, to be a reflective person and say, wow, do I feel this way because, maybe I need to rethink what I'm doing. That is not a popular thing to do in this culture. And so we have literally millions of people that never reflected on that. They just kept looking for their savior that's sort of a savior, but not really, but a savior of their that they have been damaged, and they're looking for somebody that enables them to lash back at people who harmed them that they cannot lash back at. Somebody may be dead. They might be in a position they can't do anything about, like their father or their boss, or maybe it was a boss from 20 years ago, and they cannot lash back at that person. So they transfer that to whatever scapegoat they think they can justify as being that bad person. And people that look different, don't have political power, may not have economic power, are just really convenient scapegoats. But they can't logically defend it, and so they don't logically defend it. They just say, wow, somebody finally speaks my mind from a position of power, and they get that ecstatic feeling. And that's what my memory of that was triggered just now by your conversation. So thank you.
Well, thank you for your call. We have about 4 more minutes, and I have a lot to say about that. One of the things that it triggers for me, and made me really understand when I was listening to Chris talk was, it's when you have a toddler, they're good all day at school, and as soon as the parent shows up, they melt down and have a tantrum, even if it's in front of the leaders of the school.
Right.
They tantrum, they protest, they act out and do all kinds of stuff. And this is basically what has happened. But when they come back to school the next day, they get in line, they do exactly what they're supposed to do,
right,
until they learn differently, right? And so I feel like this is what happens in this country. When we've had other presidents, you get in line, you follow the rules, you don't act out.
Right.
But as soon as your parent shows up, you have a meltdown. So this, I think, is a predominant or dominating belief. He said a lot of things. Cognitive dissonance, and we don't have a reflexive culture, and the culture is absent of the ability to reflect, and I think that's really important to remember. But this country, because everybody wants to believe that slavery should, not first of all be affecting African Americans still 400 years later. But not only is it affecting African Americans, this is where it shows up again in the white culture.
Wow.
Right? So the country was built on do as I say, not as I do. And so we embedded that into our religious belief and our religious practices when we created certain doctrines in the Bible. Everybody wants to believe that these are all Christ's words, but if you study the Bible, you know that there are a lot of inconsistencies in there, which means that there are doctrines that were created and placed in the Bible to manipulate people. But what they didn't count on is that at some point it wouldn't be race that we would be controlling, but ideas, right? Not just by skin color, but the idea, because it started off as an idea that was tailored towards African Americans, and then it went on to a greater race, and this is what we get. And so now you have mega people who are following rules, not reflecting and not seeking it for themselves, but looking for the rules because we've been taught to do as I say and not as I do. And so this is the absence of the reflexive culture, and that is not doesn't discriminate based on your race. It doesn't discriminate based on your culture, your color. It's based on where you worship and the person that you're following. And so I agree with them. I agree on some level. We're not thinking, but we've been actually discouraged from having a mind of our own, right? And so this brings us to the end of our show. It's 9:00. We thank you for joining us on the Frequency of Hope. Again, your host is Stephanie Clark, and we are co-hosting tonight Pastor Alva Kershaw and Pastor Latrell Bush. We thank you for joining us as we celebrate the legacy and the life of Martin Luther King. Have a great night.
Thank you. And you are listening to WRWK 93 FM, serving Richmond and surrounding areas. Community radio, building a bridge, city to city, left to right, neighbor to neighbor.
For middle income families and kids was you ought to be involved in politics because it's your duty. You hear this on election day. Some announcers will say a kind of public service announcement. Today is election day. Don't forget to vote. Why? Why should I vote? Well, because it's your duty. It's like it's your day to carry out the garbage.
Well, it's in your interest to do so. That's what we need to convince them.
In schools that served well-off families, they were taught that politics is the way you get or keep what's yours, your self-interest. New Deal liberalism appealed to people saying, well, let's vote this way for black people or whatever, because it's your duty or because it's morally the thing to do.
But we're all in it together, really.
Talk to people about their self-interest. That's true. I mean, like, for example, you say, well,